So I'm curious about your first discovery of the 1898 coup. So where did you first learn about this incident in history?
Well, when I moved to Wilmington in 1994, it was something that was in there. It was something that was talked about. Of course, when Philip Gerard published his book, I read that, and I read a lot of newspaper articles about it. And I just thought that that was history. That's the way America is. You know, we have a tragic history behind the scenes of every town, and especially in the South. And I never really imagined that myself writing about it. At the time, I was preoccupied with much different subject matter. But it was the 2008 presidential election that somehow jarred my sense of, jarred my consciousness into forcing me to focus on this. I couldn't think about anything else, so I started researching and I started writing.
So going beyond just the initial discovery of it and when you did this, what was your actual reaction to this? Like when you first learned about this coming to be, what was your reaction to this sudden information of that there was a coup existing and that this coup was stimulated a lot by racial segregation?
Well, it didn't surprise me that much. You know, I've spent a lot of my life out west, where certainly the colorful history throughout the Old West, and I've lived a lot in California and thought a lot about the experience of Japanese Americans in World War II. It's different, though, when you live in a place for a long time, and when you live in a place from 1994 to 2008, and you're working with the people, and with the students, and with the families that whole time, and getting to know them, and feeling a part with each passing year, more and more a part of the fabric of that place. And then at some point, I think you start to take ownership of the history.
Now, also looking into the text that you wrote down, you have a lot of use of quotes and quotations inside your text, and I'm curious as to why you chose those, if these are from actual sources, or if these were just meant to be ways of rewording things, or what was the purpose of the quotations?
The quotes are, they're direct quotes, and some of them I found when I was writing the poem in the 1898 commission. The state had commissioned a massive, it's like 80-page report on 1898, and it had come out a year or two before I wrote this poem. I had also read some archival sources and some magazine articles from the day, and I just pulled things out that I thought would be useful. It's a little difficult to write a poem about a series of events with such so many thousands of people involved and such far-reaching implications, and I had to really pick and choose just a few. So that's what I did. I found, some of it is factual, some of it is just word of mouth. Somebody was interviewed for a magazine, and this is what they said, that they saw someone, or people claimed to have been there, and were actually boastful about what they had done.
Right.
You begin and end the poem with you and your daughter in a very peaceful scene on the side of a river. Could you maybe talk about why you use that device to bookend your poem?
I think that most of us that fortunate enough to live in these beautiful places, what I thought in 2008 was that we really need to stop taking things for granted. And I think part of being American and standing, trying to bring whatever we have to the table of change and social justice. I wanted to put myself in the poem. I wanted to put the fact that I was a father in the poem, and I wanted to put it in the poem with love. As someone who lives here now, and is willing to incorporate that history, the worst part of this place's history, in my poetry, and to do that with love.
And do you see the emergence of the story of 1898, a story that really was, I've heard people around here talk, they really weren't aware of it 10, 15, 25 years ago. Do you think the emergence of that story is a healthy thing for the country to, as you said, see the parts of our history which maybe aren't as pleasant and as peaceful as we might have thought?
It's interesting how, and this is a kind of an oblique way to answer the question, but it's interesting when they first started to acknowledge that 1898 had happened, and there was some resistance to commemorating it in this city. And then eventually, oddly enough, it was the Saturday after the election of 2008 when the monument was unveiled, and I was there. Mm-hmm. That was the same week, you know, strange coincidence, that they finally publicly acknowledged 1898 for the first time after 110 years or something, in the same week when our first black president was elected. Probably a little too ironic to be, you know, plausible, but you know, that's how our history progresses, by fits and starts. I'm a little sorry that the monument was so far out of town, but it seems like the town is reaching out to will eventually make it out there.
I'm struck by that. You said that you were inspired and wrote the poem before the election, and then the monument unveiled after, and that your question about this, that the resistance to knowing, you know, there were so many people who were upset to bring it back to light, and it reminds me of the people who kind of blame Obama for a rise that they perceive in racial discord, that somehow he caused it. And is he causing it by being a black president, and therefore people wanted to obstruct or what? But I feel that your question, and you're pointing out the timing, kind of, it's almost as though that foreshadowed what was going to happen in his presidency. And because I was surprised the first time I heard someone actually blaming him for bringing racism back, as though it had been gone.
These elements that for so long had remained successfully tucked away in our collective unconscious were finally out, and we had to talk about them. And I suppose there was some anger and some resentment about that. But if we don't talk about things, we can never truly accept them. We can never truly take the steps that we need to take to make sure that they don't happen again.
Mm-hmm. And one way that you've done in this poem is by talking about 1898, which is distance enough in time, rather than talking about the election that was going on in the present. That was what was disturbing to you. And now the students are finding these connections between past and present, and working right now on letters to the editor about that, and that this is not new, what's going on. Mm-hmm. Interesting combinations.
Yeah. I think that to be a poet, to be a writer of any sort, you're going to feel really lonely a lot of the time. You're going to spend a lot of time at your desk, and you will often have a feeling that no one will ever read my poem anyway. That no one will read my article anyway. It'll end up in some, you know, dusty archive in a library like this. And it feels as if the things that we write and the things that we think can have no effect. And what I wanted to do in this poem is to do it anyway, as honestly as I could, and hope that someone might read it. If I knew that if I were ever going to write a poem about what had happened here, this was the right time. And I didn't want to let this opportunity pass.
Any other questions, y'all? Any more for you? Well, thank you very much. You? I didn't mean to leave you out.
Good.